hope not using your hide and sleeping in a little leaf. Is that a gnat?
Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome and welcome back to the channel. I'm Elle, and this is Elle's Reptiles. This week we are going to be talking about 5 different pests that can infect your reptile room and how you can prevent them and how you can get rid of them. It is summertime, it is hot, and this is the time that things decide to crawl into tanks and infest those tanks. So I thought now would be a good time to talk about those things. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Her Gecko, so make sure to stay until the end of the video to find out all about this awesome company. Let's get started. Really quick foreword here. The most important part of not having pests in your reptile room is prevention. That is much easier said than done. If you're watching this video, you might already have some sort of infestation, and so this is pointless to say. But preventing the pests to begin with is going to be the most important part, and for the most part, I'll talk about each individual one, but for the most part, preventing those pests is going to be as simple as cleaning out those tanks and making sure you're not leaving like food and old stuff in the tanks. But anyway, let's get on to the critters. The first one we're going to talk about is ants. Ants are not a fun time. They generally are harmless. If we're talking about tiny little sugar ants, just the tiny little black ants, those are generally going to be harmless for your reptile, but they are so incredibly annoying because once they get into the reptile room and they start like making their houses, you're going to see ants nonstop, and then they're going to get into other enclosures and make houses, colonies, homes, I don't know. They take over very quickly. We had this problem last year, the year before last, can't remember, I have no concept of time, but we had this issue and it was so incredibly aggravating because you just see ants all the time. The biggest way that you're going to prevent having an ant infestation in your enclosures, in your reptile room, is not leaving food out. So especially if you have things like crested geckos or mourning geckos or anything that you're feeding that powdery food to, make sure that you are getting rid of that food. Or if you have, I don't know, bearded dragons, blue-tongued skinks, and you're giving them things like fruit or even vegetables, the ants are obviously going to be drawn to those leftover food items that are being left in the tanks. So the way to deal with ants once they are in your enclosure, the way that we dealt with ants, is by using something called, I can never say this right, diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous? Pronounce.
We are looking at how to pronounce. How do you say diatomaceous?
Diatomaceous. I said it right. Good job, me. So the way that we dealt with this is by using something called diatomaceous earth, and the only reason that we knew about this product is because it was recommended for us to use in our duck pens during the summertime to get rid of fly larvae, and it was safe for ducks. And if you have ever kept any sort of birds, you know that a lot of things are not safe for them because of their very fragile lungs. So we happened upon this product, super helpful. Essentially, it is powdered fossilized diatoms, which are creatures that like lived in the ocean. I don't know, but basically they have been fossilized and they're broken down to a powder. So for us, it just looks like this fluffy white powder. For tiny little bugs, it is like shards of glass. Like, it is very sharp. They can't walk over it and be okay. So that's very dark. When I was looking up how to deal with the ants in my enclosure, I saw multiple things that said you could put this in the enclosure. I didn't feel comfortable with that. So what I personally did is I put a ring, like a thick powder ring, around the enclosures. That way that there's no gaps. That way if those ants are going to leave that enclosure, then they die. And so it forces them all to be in there. And then, because this happened in my crested geckos tank, then I just kind of flooded the tank. Instead of just like misting and spraying it down, I took some bottles of water, poured it in there. They came out panicky and went through the trails, and they were no more, and it got rid of this. It just sounds so terrible. So far we are in August and we have not had an ant infestation this year. So you also of course have the option of just taking the whole thing down, getting rid of all the soil, putting new soil in. We couldn't do that because they're fully bioactive tanks, and I didn't want to kill the springtail and isopod population to get rid of the ants. The next pest we're going to talk about is another summertime gem, and that is gnats. I did an entire video on specifically how to get rid of gnats, so if you want a very in-depth, detailed how to get rid of gnats thing with like videos showing how to make traps and stuff, click here. Just to quickly go over it. First of all, gnat prevention, again, just clean up those tanks. Also, a lot of times when you get soil, like you get a new bag of soil, sometimes it has gnat eggs in it. So if you actually bake the soil in the oven first, that can actually get rid of the gnat eggs and prevent a gnat infestation from happening to begin with. When you get like new plants, make sure that you are getting rid of all the soil that comes in that plant and you are cleaning those leaves, just rinsing them off really good, because there can be gnat eggs in that soil or around those plants as well. So make sure you're just cleaning things and disinfecting things before you put it in the tank, and that will prevent gnats. Because essentially what happens, you put that soil in the tank or you put that plant in the tank and it's fine, and then summer happens and the warm temperatures are what actually cause those gnat eggs to hatch and infestations to happen. Really quick on how to get rid of the gnats, you can make gnat traps by mixing vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and dish soap in like a jar with some kind of lid. In that video I actually showed you different ways to make those gnat traps. Or you can use something called mosquito bits, and that is another object, another item that is safe to go in your tank. You can sprinkle it just right on the soil in your tank, and or if you just have plants and you have a gnat problem, you can sprinkle it around your plants. You can get that at like feeder stores, any kind of like farm stores will have those, and I think Walmart might have them in the garden section. Gnats are very irritating, and we have had a couple of different gnat infestations in this house. Again, this is the first summer that we don't have an infestation, so that's nice. Moving right along to flies. This kind of falls along the same lines as the gnats. Flies are so irritating. We've had one tank one time that had flies and it's so gross because you don't know that it's happening until you find maggots. It was gross. In our case, I say tank. It wasn't a tank. It was a was it dewey roaches or crickets? It was like a feeder tank, a feeder container. We had put vegetables in that container, and I went back and there were maggots in the vegetables because flies. There were so many flies. It was so gross. So, big thing on preventing flies, like fruit flies or just regular flies. Moths, I guess that they're not moths, are not flies, but that also you can get moth infestations as well, and they also come with maggots. Super gross. To prevent that, biggest thing, get that food out of there on time, even for your bugs. If your bugs have vegetables in there for a couple days, get those vegetables out. You don't want anything infesting those vegetables. Clean the tank, and then the same sort of thing, the gnat traps and mosquito bits, all that will also work for things like fruit flies. So that's all wrapped together. The next one is a big, scary, terrifying one that everyone is scared of, and it is mites, or some people call them snake mites, external parasitic mites. This one, again, prevention is key. Make sure you're cleaning those tanks. Make sure you are spot cleaning waste, and make sure that you are getting captive bred animals, not wild caught animals, from good sources. This is the biggest one because any animal that comes in that is a wild caught animal is going to have parasites, and if they have external parasites and you don't see it, because sometimes they burrow under those scales and they're hard to see, you don't see it, you put them in your reptile room, you could risk having your entire reptile room being infested with mites, and it's scary, it's terrifying. You don't want that. The way to prevent this, captive bred animals, keeping those tanks clean. Also, when you bring animals home, put them in a quarantine tank away from other animals just to make sure that everything is okay. You're not going to keep them there for very long, just a couple weeks. Some people say up to a month. Just put them away from other animals. This doesn't necessarily have to be done if you have one reptile, but if you have a reptile room, probably don't bring animals home and just stick them in the room with everything else immediately, just in case. Especially if you are rescuing animals, make sure that those animals are coming in and going in a separate space. So what do you do if you notice that your animal has mites? So the first thing you're going to do is you are going to need to essentially tear that enclosure apart. All that substrate needs to go into the trash. All of the things that are in the enclosure and the enclosure itself needs to be deep cleaned. You could even potentially just throw it out and start over, because mite eggs are tiny, tiny little things and they can be everywhere. If you do have like built-in backgrounds and you can't take them out and clean them out and you don't want to throw that out, you can do things like using products. There's one called Prevenamite, and you can like spray that in the enclosure really good. I do not have a lot of experience with this, but Snake Discovery has multiple videos about treating mites. I will actually leave one of the links to one of them down in the description. I know they use diluted ivermectin, don't know how to say that either. And that's what they would use. Yeah, I'll leave that link down below if you are needing to treat mites, like write me out. Their video is very detailed, so many details there. So once that tank is all broken down and thoroughly cleaned out, you need to give your animal a bath, or some people will use like olive oil. So if you're giving them a bath, you're going to give them a bath in using Dawn dish soap. Or you can take like a paper towel and kind of gently, lightly wipe them down with olive oil. You don't want them to be like slippery worms or anything, but just lightly a coat of olive oil. That kind of helps the mites get off. Oh, and there's also a lot of reptile safe mite sprays available. Lugardi makes one. And there's another company called Natural Chemistry, I think it is, that makes one. There's a bunch of different ones. Make sure if you use something like that, you read those directions and follow those directions so that it is as safe as possible for your animal. And the last little invaders we're going to talk about is one that you can't see, and that is internal parasites. With this, just like all the other ones, you got to keep those tanks clean, spot clean any waste that you see, keep food and stuff cleaned up. The reasoning for that is a lot of reptiles, like bearded dragons, actually already have parasites in their body. And when they get stressed, or if their temperatures aren't right, or they get stressed from moving to a new home, anything like that can make those numbers explode. And then if they use the bathroom in that tank, the parasites are going to come out. And then if it is left, they're going to run through that, and they can run through it and get it in their food, and then they just eat them, ingest them, and it becomes this cycle. Make sure you are cleaning those tanks, cleaning up any uneaten food. With the internal parasites, another preventative measure is, again, make sure you are getting captive bred animals from good breeders. Wild-caught animals are always going to come with parasites. That is how we knew that our crocodile skink that we got, that we were told was a captive bred animal, was wild caught, because we took her to the vet for her new pet visit, and she had like 3 or 4 different types of parasites. Along those lines, I always suggest taking a fecal sample into a local vet. A lot of vets, even if they don't have reptile specialists, will still test and treat your reptile for parasites. Just call and ask if they do reptile fecal parasite exams, and it's usually as simple as you go in to your animal's tank, you see the used bathroom, take a plastic baggie, like a little Ziploc baggie, kind of put it inside out, put your hand in that so you don't have to touch anything, grab it, pull it the right way, seal it, and then I like to put it in a second Ziploc bag, and then you're just gonna stick that in your refrigerator until you can drop it off. So you can actually get it, I think, up to like a day in advance, get the sample up to a day in advance, as long as it's in the refrigerator. Just again, make sure that you call ahead and ask if that's okay. You don't want to just show up with random animal poop in a bag and just assume it's all going to be okay. So make sure to call ahead on that. But a huge part of parasites and making sure your animal doesn't have parasites is recognizing the signs of having parasites. So this is going to be, internal parasites are going to be much more prevalent in things like lizards as opposed to snakes, but you're looking for things like lethargy, like are they sleeping all day all of a sudden? Are they not eating? Or are they eating nonstop and losing weight? Behavioral changes. So did your like super sweet lizard, like are they now hissing at you and trying to bite you? Or did your very angry lizard, are they now just okay with you picking them up? Any big behavioral changes like that. Glass surfing is another one. Make sure that you recognize those signs in your animals. I have a couple of different videos about like common illnesses in leopard geckos, common illnesses in bearded dragons, if you need those. But that is it. That is all that I have for this week's video. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully the video helped. As I said at the beginning of this video is sponsored by iHeartGeckos. iHeartGeckos makes awesome conversion kits for your tanks, so any kind of inexpensive tanks that you may have laying around. This is a piece of acrylic that goes into the front. You silicone it around. You may wait for that silicone smell to go away, and then you have a front opening tank for so many different types of animals. They have all different sizes. They have ones that turn your tank into like a vertical tank or horizontal. So many different options. They are super awesome and a very inexpensive way to get a tank that you want. If you happen to order from iHeartGeckos.com, make sure to leave Elle's Reptiles in the How Did You Hear About Us box. That way they know that you guys are coming from here. Thank you so much to iHeartGeckos for sponsoring this video. As always, if you haven't already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday, and some Wednesdays, some Sundays, trying my best, and sometimes shorts on Wednesdays. This week's Instagram shout out is here, this week's shout out is here. Thank you so much for liking and following, subscribing, and commenting and sharing, and all that jazz. You are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. Water. I need water. I look sick. I feel like I look sick. This is news to me. Okay, I can never say this right. So they're my contact lines. But external parasite. External parasite. Okay. At one point, I don't know if they still do, used diluted, what's it called? They use dilute. As always, if you don't already, please feel free to follow me on my socials and like, subscribe. I feel like I did that wrong. As always, if you